Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about the hidden bugs in your mental software. Those predictable little glitches in your brain that influence, well, everything, from what coffee you grab in the morning to your biggest life decisions.
So let me ask you something right off the bat. How much control do you really have over your own mind? I mean, you probably think you're making rational choices, right? But what if I told you that most of your decisions are actually being made for you by these, invisible forces? Let's dive in and find out.
It's a really comforting thought, isn't it? This idea that we're these super rational beings, carefully weighing all the pros and cons before we do anything. We love to tell ourselves we're in the driver's seat, making all our decisions based on just cold, hard facts.
Yeah, but the truth? Well, the truth is that for decades now, researchers have been proving that our minds are just chock full of these secret shortcuts and hidden biases. These are the invisible forces that are constantly nudging us, pushing us, and pulling our decisions in directions we don't even notice.
And these forces, they actually have a name: cognitive biases. To put it simply, they're basically predictable glitches in the way we think. And these aren't just random mistakes, okay? They are systematic patterns that affect every single one of us every single day.
The best way to think about them is as mental shortcuts. Seriously, our brains evolved to use these shortcuts to make really quick snap judgments, and that saves us a ton of time and energy. It's a survival thing, really. But here's the catch. While these shortcuts are usually super helpful, they can also lead to some major blind spots and some really serious errors in judgment.
All right, so let's meet some of these mental shortcuts, shall we? I'm actually willing to bet you're going to recognize a few of them from your own life, maybe even something you did this morning.
So a huge chunk of what we know about these biases comes from the truly groundbreaking work of two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. These guys identified so many of the key shortcuts our brains take, things like loss aversion, anchoring, the framing effect, and they showed the world just how predictably and wonderfully irrational we all can be.
Okay, first up is a big one: loss aversion. The idea is so simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Basically, the pain of losing something feels about twice as strong as the pleasure you'd get from gaining the exact same thing. It's the reason why losing a $20 bill just hurts so much more than the joy you get from finding one on the street. And believe me, marketers use this against us all the time with something called the framing effect. Look, the meat here is identical, exactly the same. But framing it as a positive 75% lean is just way, way more appealing than focusing on the negative 25% fat. It's the same exact product, but because our brain hates loss so much, it triggers a completely different emotional reaction.
All right, next up we've got the anchoring bias. This is our brain's funny little habit of latching on to the very first piece of information it gets. Just think about it. When a car salesperson throws out that initial high price, that first number becomes the anchor. And then it subconsciously influences how good that final discounted price feels, even if that first number was completely pulled out of thin air.
So what happens when our actions totally clash with our beliefs? Well, that's when you get something called cognitive dissonance. It's that uncomfortable, scratchy mental static you feel in a situation like this. And to make that discomfort go away, we've got two choices. We either have to change our behavior or, and this is what usually happens, we just rationalize it. We literally invent a new belief like, oh, this helps me relax, just to make that conflict in our head go away.
Then, of course, there's confirmation bias. You could call this the engine of our modern-day echo chambers. This is our natural built-in tendency to look for, to favor, and to remember information that just so happens to support what we already believe. I mean, it feels good to be right, doesn't it? So our brain actively filters out any evidence that might, prove us wrong.
And finally, we have the famous, or maybe infamous, Dunning-Kruger effect. To put it in a nutshell, people with low ability are often just too, low ability to even realize it. Their lack of knowledge makes them wildly overconfident. And on the flip side, you have the true experts, who often do the complete opposite. They underestimate their own skills because they just assume everyone else must find it easy too.
So here's the really crucial point. These aren't just fascinating little psychological quirks to talk about at parties. No, these mental shortcuts have very real and sometimes very, very high costs in our daily lives. They affect everything, from what's in your wallet to the very fabric of our society.
Just take the world of finance, for example. A bias like loss aversion that makes us hold on to losing stocks for way too long, just hoping they'll bounce back. And at the exact same time, you've got herding bias, which can cause everyone to pile into the same hot investment, creating these incredibly dangerous market bubbles. Believe me, these aren't minor influences. They are major, major drivers of economic booms and busts.
And this whole problem gets totally supercharged in our digital world. I mean, think about it. Social media algorithms, they really only have one main goal: keep you scrolling. And they have learned that the absolute best way to do that is to exploit our biases. They feed us this constant diet of super emotional us versus them content because they know our brains just can't look away. And the result of all that? More polarization and an absolute fire hose of misinformation.
Okay, I know this all sounds a little bleak, but it's not a totally hopeless situation. Look, we can't just eliminate these biases. They're kind of baked into our DNA. But the good news, and there is good news, is that we can learn to spot them. We can learn to fight back. And that allows us to make clearer, more deliberate decisions.
It pretty much boils down to a three-step approach. First is just building awareness. Honestly, just knowing these biases exist is half the battle. The second step is using frameworks, structured models like a simple pros and cons list, to force your brain to just slow down. And third, it's all about practicing new mental habits that can act like a defense system against your own worst instincts.
So here's some of the most effective tools you can use. A really simple one is to just delay making big decisions, especially when you're feeling emotional. Just give your rational brain some time to catch up. Another great one is to actively challenge your own opinions. Like, force yourself to look for evidence that contradicts what you believe. And maybe one of the most powerful tools is taking an outside view. Just ask yourself, what would I advise a friend to do in this situation? That simple shift in perspective can instantly cut right through all the emotional noise and show you the logical path forward.
Look, understanding these hidden forces isn't just some abstract psychology lesson. It is the very first step toward reclaiming control of your own mind. It's all about making smarter, more conscious choices in a world that is constantly trying to make them for you. So I'll leave you with this thought to chew on. Which of your own mental shortcuts are you going to challenge first?